Hi everyone and welcome once again to Ruby's Classic Cooking. And today I'm making a Yule Log, which I hope you will enjoy watching. And it's going to be part of my jelly roll based series. It's also one of my Christmas baking things. I'm going to a potluck supper tomorrow night and I am taking the chocolate Yule Log for dessert. I've got here 3 eggs, which I have had sitting out here for a while, so they've reached room temperature. And I'm going to start this off like I do my regular jelly roll with beating this for 5 minutes, these eggs, which I'm not going to make you watch. So I'm just going to break these individually into a bowl just to make sure no eggshell gets into here, to my big stand mixer bowl. I have done this with a hand mixer, but you know what? It's so much easier with a stand mixer. So if you've got one, use it. If you don't have one, put it on your wish list. Maybe Santa will bring you one for Christmas. You never know. Maybe you'll find a really super fantastic deal on one at a thrift store somewhere. Who knows what you might find these days. But they are definitely worth the investment. You're going to do much baking and cooking in your kitchen. I will bring you back when I've got these all beaten up so I can show you what they look like after 5 solid minutes of beating on medium low. If you have to use a hand mixer to do this, that's okay. Just remember, you got to put a timer on and make sure it's 5 minutes, at least 5 minutes, because that is what's going to cause you to have loft in your sponge. If they're not beaten enough, you won't get the loft in your sponge, and you'll wonder why, and that's why. Alright, here I am back again, and my eggs have been beating for 5 minutes, and I'll show you what they look like now. And it really helps if they're room temperature, because it helps them to, it helps them loft even more. It helps your eggs to get even more loft on. Now, let's show you inside my bowl here. There you go. That's what your eggs should look like after 5 minutes of beating. Nice and light yellow, and very fluffy. Very foamy. Eggs. This is the only sponge cake I've ever come across that doesn't require that you separate the eggs first, so I really like it for that reason. I'm just going to turn my mixer on and keep it running while I add my 1 cup of sugar, 1/4 cup at a time, and then I'm going to add about 2/3 of a teaspoon of vanilla. I tend to be a bit generous with that because it's a chocolate one, so I'm using vanilla this time. Then I will add 2 tablespoons of milk, and then I'll add 1/4 teaspoon of salt and 2 teaspoons of baking powder, not baking soda, baking powder. Then I will be adding 1/4 cup of, this is already sifted cocoa, unsweetened cocoa powder. That's what you need for this. You don't want to add any more sugar to it. And then when that's done, I'll add my 1 cup of flour, and then you just barely want to mix that up so that the flour is just taken in, because you don't want to toughen your cake. If you beat it too long after you add the flour, it can be tough. Then I'm going to pour it onto my prepared pan over here, which is known as a jelly roll pan or a sheet pan, and this one is 15.5 inches by 10.5 inches, which I've got the metric equivalents. Everything will be in metric on the on my down below in my descriptions below. Now I just line this with parchment paper because it makes it a lot easier to get the cake off. And that will go straight into my preheated 400-degree Fahrenheit, 205 degrees Celsius oven for 8 to 10 minutes until my cake has risen up, and it'll cook hot, and it'll be a nice, lovely, soft sponge. Then I'll put it out on a damp tea towel and roll it up into a log, a jelly roll, a Swiss roll. It's all kinds of different things people call them. And then I'll leave it sit there in the damp tea towel till it cools off. While I'm doing that, I'll mix up icing for the filling. It'll be a chocolate mocha filling with some coffee flavored liqueur. I'm using Kahlua today. Anyway, I'll get on with mixing this up, and I'll show you what the batter looks like when I'm putting it into the pan, okay? Now when I add this cocoa powder, I'm going to be a little bit careful because I don't want it flying all over my kitchen. So I'm just going to mix this very slowly here at first. And in goes my flour, very carefully like. There we go. Flour in. Alright, here I am back again, and here is my batter, all beaten up nice and chocolatey. That wasn't too difficult, now was it? Now I'm going to put this in my pan and pop it in the oven, 8 to 10 minutes, like I said, 400 degrees Fahrenheit, 205 Celsius. I'll be back in 8 to 10 minutes when I have my cold wet tea towel spread out here. I'm going to put my cake on it and show you how I roll it up. Alright, it's been 10 minutes and here's my beautiful chocolate sponge, which I'm now going to dump right onto this cake, this paper. 1, 2, 3, here we go. Quick, just be quick. Peel the paper off of this, off the back of this. This chocolate cake. Started here so it doesn't all stick to the parchment paper. It's not supposed to stick to the parchment paper. What are you doing to me, cake? What are you doing to me? There you go. And there we go. All right, I'm just going to cut the edges off my cake. Let me just tip this camera down. There now. I'm going to cut the edges off my cake, and because I don't want it to crack when I roll it. So just cut the edges off of here. I just take the oldest, cheapest knife in my drawer, the most dull, oldest knife in my drawer that I use for this. You don't want to cut through your tea towel, right? So it's going to cut, if this knife is so dull, it'll cut the cake, but it won't cut the tea towel. And these little bits I'll be saving for a little cook sample afterwards. My lovely coffee flavored icing, and maybe dip them in a bit of the chocolate ganache icing just to see what it tastes like. Okay, now carefully pick up the edge of your tea towel and roll it away from you just like this, carefully, slowly, so you don't crack the cake. The moisture will help. The moisture in the tea towel will help, and it will help keep the cake from sticking to the tea towel. It will help keep the cake from sticking to the tea towel. Now I'm going to leave this sit for at least 5 minutes until it has remembered this shape. Right, I'm going to leave this sit here till it cools off because I'm making a butter icing, and if I put a butter icing on a hot cake, you know what's going to happen? The butter's going to melt and it's going to be a mess. Today I'm going to use my food processor to make my icing. It makes icing super quick, and if you've got a food processor, it's lurking in a dark corner, get it out and use it for making your icing, because you know those little cans from the grocery store? This can whip up icing that's better than that because it's made with actual real butter in about 10 or 15 seconds. In fact, it always takes me longer to assemble my ingredients and measure them out than it does for the food processor to make the icing. So what I'm going to do is I'll bring this over here. bring my food processor bowl over here and put my ingredients in, and then I'll put it on. In about 10 seconds, I'll have icing. A little scrape down, done. I'm going to start out with 1 2/3 cups of icing sugar. That's confectioner's sugar, known in some parts of the world as confectioner's sugar, baker's sugar. It's what you use to make butter icing. Wherever you live, whatever they call it, it's very, very finely ground up powdered sugar. That's 1 cup, 1 2/3 cups. And don't worry, I'll figure out the metric equivalents and put that in the box below. And the nice thing about this is I don't have to sieve or do anything to this. I can just dump it straight into my food processor, because I know my food processor will take care of getting rid of all those lumps. Okay, that's my icing sugar in. Up next is a 1/2 cup of room temperature butter. So I took this out of the fridge earlier and cut it up into little pieces because it warms up to your room temperature a lot more quickly when it's cut in small pieces than if you leave it in one great big block. Yeah, I'm just gonna drop this in here all over the place. There we go, spread it around my bowl a bit. And if you don't have a food processor, you can use your stand mixer, your handheld mixer, or you can beat it up by hand. But I'll tell you, technology makes this a lot easier to do. And now I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of coffee flavored liqueur. And I have Kahlua here, and I haven't measured this. It's the kind of the bottom of the bottle here that we've had downstairs in the liquor cabinet for a while. So I'm hoping there's 2 tablespoons in here. And yep, there's 2 tablespoons. Yay! I didn't have to run out and buy some Kahlua at the last second. 1 1/2 tablespoons of cocoa powder, and I did sieve this because I wanted to make sure there weren't any big giant lumps in it. Okay, that's everything now in my processor bowl. About a minute and I'll have icing in here. 10 seconds to a minute and I'll have this all done up as beautiful icing. I'm just going to take my blade out of here and give what's left in here a little mix around, and I will be looking at a bowl full of icing. And there is my beautiful, rich looking coffee liqueur flavored icing to put in my cake. So when this cools off, my icing is ready to go. And once I've got that done, I'll be making my chocolate ganache for the covering for it. But this first has to chill, I guess, in the refrigerator for a couple of hours, and a few other cooling times it has to cool off. So I'm just going to leave this where it is right now to cool, and I'll come back when that's cooled and show you filling it. Then I wrap it up well with plastic wrap, put it in the fridge for 2 hours, and let's see what happens next, eh? Okay, here I am back again. I'm going to unroll my cake now, and I'm going to fill it with my chocolate mocha icing, frosting, filling, frosting. Let's hope my cake didn't crack too badly. I was sitting here cooling. Get rid of this damn tea towel. Unroll. Let's hope it hasn't stuck to itself in here too badly. And that unrolls for me nicely. Let's hope. So I want it to look like a log. Uh-oh, I'm afraid it's kind of, I'm afraid that it's not going to look too much like a log. Well, anyway, there we go. Let's just blob this icing in here. I've got my cake spreader here handy. Just going to put some blobs on here to make it easier to spread. Nice and thick. Should turn out looking nicely like the wood in the tree. Let's just spread this out here. And you want to get right to the edges so that when you're looking at the end of your log, you're going to see a nice spiral of icing at the end of your log. There we go. All nicely spread out. A nice even layer all over your cake. And then get it all rolled up again. Because then I think it says to refrigerate it for another 2 hours or something like that. Okay, now I've got all my icing on, and now I'm just going to roll this up again, like so. Oh, I think I should have put this on. Oh dear, I should have put this on plastic or something, because it kind of stuck to my counter. Forgot about that. Oops. Got the plastic wrap right here. Okay, when you take it out of the tea towel, roll it onto a piece of plastic wrap, not like I did onto this counter, or sprinkle some icing sugar on your counter so it doesn't stick, because mine is kind of sticking to my counter, I'm afraid. I'm afraid I missed a step. Oops. Hope I don't have to start again. I forgot a vital step, which is shake icing sugar all over your cake and all over your wrap so that it doesn't stick. Oh, what a mess I'm making. There. Now it's got icing sugar all over it, and it won't stick to my plastic wrap. I'm going to put this into the refrigerator for 2 hours. But first I'm going to put something underneath of it to keep it nice and sturdy. But now it's all wrapped up in and covered in a nice coating of icing sugar to keep it from sticking to my plastic wrap. 2 hours in the refrigerator to make sure it's firmly set. And in the meantime, I'm going to make myself some ganache with 6 ounces of chocolate chips and 1 cup of whipping cream, which is 35% butterfat. So let me get this out of the way, and I'll be back in a minute. And I am going to now heat up my whipping cream that I now have. I'm going to put a cup of it in my pot here, which I'm going to put on the stove and heat until it's almost boiling. And I'm not sure just how long it's going to take, but I'll let you know after. And I'm going to pour it over my chocolate chips, let it sit for a minute, then whisk it until it becomes icing. I've actually never done this before, so we'll see what happens. Okay, well that took about 5-10 minutes on top of the stove, and it is, see, it's steaming. You can see the steam rising off of it, and there's a little ring inside of here from the hot cream. So I'm just going to pour this right on top of my chocolate chips and just kind of knock those down all into the cream. There we go. Now I'm just going to wait a minute and then start whisking. Took about 5 minutes or so on the burner, medium, and just look for that. There'll be a little ring that will start to form inside the pan with the butterfat starting to deposit on the pan, and you'll see little bubbles start to form on the bottom from where it's being scalded, and that's hot enough to do this. So just don't take your eye off it and wander away to do something else, because it probably will burn. Okay, now for the whisking part. I'm not sure how long this will take, but they say to whisk it until you get a lovely looking icing. So let's just start whisking. It doesn't look like much, does it? It looks kind of like chocolate milk that needs to be needs to have something added to it, doesn't it? But that's what they say it's going to look like when you stir it. You just keep going. Oh, and it's starting to form in the middle already. Look at that. Didn't take very long. Look at that. And that looks very much like chocolate ganache. Very liquidy as yet, but apparently that does get thicker as it cools off. So here now, that's all done. And you don't add anything more to that, not even a pinch of salt. So that looks like chocolate ganache. Done. Why have I never done this before, eh? And when this gets thicker, it will make the perfect icing to ice my Yule Log. I have made a Yule Log before, but last time I did, I made a chocolate buttercream icing for the outside. And this time I found this recipe and I thought, this looks interesting, chocolate ganache. Why don't I give that a try? It's always nice to try something new. There you go. So that I'm going to leave sit here for the rest of the 2 hours until the cake's ready for my ganache. I'll be back then to show you icing the Yule Log. Hi everybody and welcome back. I just got my cake out of the fridge. Looks nicely chilled. And now I'm going to decorate it with my ganache, which also seems to solidify nicely, and put it on my platter. That gorgeous little old 1970s Corel livingware Christmas platter. Anyway, I'm going to unwrap this and we'll make it into a Yule Log. Let's see what we've got here. Ah, look at that. My cake did not stick to my plastic wrap. So here it is, ready to go. Now, just gonna. This is my platter, and I'm just gonna measure against my platter where I want to put my branch. So I want to put my branch. I want to cut it right about here on an angle. I'm going to make a branch for this, and I'm going to put this over here on my platter. Yeah, let's see. Get my log here. Look at that. And now it says to take some of your ganache and use it to attach your branch to your tree. So you just kind of put some ganache on here, and you just kind of use this to attach your branch to the side here. Put a bit more up here. I guess you make that sort of a glue. Gorgeous icing glue, huh? There we go. So, I've got my spoon here. Let's see just how warm this stuff is. Go right up to the edge here and not over it. Put the rest of this on my branch. This is going to be the bark on my Yule Log. And you know what? It doesn't matter if your icing job looks a little rough or your bark looks a little rough, because you know what? It's a tree. So you want it to look a little bit rough. You want it to look like bark. In fact, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put this in the fridge for 15 minutes. And then I'm going to take the tip of a knife or a fork, and I'm going to try to make this look even more like bark. And I've got some sprinkles I'm going to put on here. In fact, I may put them on right now. I think I'll put these on right now, yes. They're chocolate curls. And I'm just going to sprinkle these chocolate curls over my log, like this. So they'll stick to my ganache right now while it's still wet. It's a little bit more chocolate on here. And then I'll come back and use my knife tip and try to create some bark-looking design on my Yule Log here. And this is where you could put one of those plastic sprigs of holly on here, sprinkle a little bit of icing on top as snow. How to make mushroom meringues that you can put around here. All kinds of good things you can put on here. So anyway, this is what I'm going to take tomorrow, and I think I'll clean up the edges here a bit too after this is cooled off a bit. I'm going to put this back in the fridge for 15 minutes, and I'll be back again and I'll show you what the final finished cake looks like. Right, and now my cake has been in the fridge for 15 minutes. So my icing is supposed to be firmed up. So now I am going to be using my tip of my knife and my fork to see if I can create some realistic looking bark. Is that a thing? Let's see what I can do to my cake. Now you know that bark is not even or regular or whatever, it's very irregular, so I'm just going to draw some kind of wiggly lines through here just to give it a bit of the texture of rough bark. See how that translates here. Just bring it out to the end of your log. There we are. Let's make a few ribbons through here. Kind of wavy ganache here. Ridges in my bark. Like an old oak tree or something, eh? There we go. If that enhances the effect or not, I don't know. Anyway, just kind of play with it as you feel inspired to do. And just going to bring this up here a bit. Bring my ganache up here to fill up some of the places where it was too. A nice layer of ganache under here. Yeah, it's nice and shiny. The ganache turned out nice and shiny and dark brown. I'll just put a few here inside of my little branch here. Some more over here. Free from any of the ganache so that the swirls inside show up. I think I'm finished. There we go. And now my cake is all decorated. Like I said, if you wanted to add some meringue mushrooms, just look up a recipe for how to do those. Or if you want to add some of that plastic holly with the red berries, that might be pretty on top too. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching me make this Yule log today, and I hope that you will subscribe and like and make maybe a comment about my recipe, and I hope that you will give this a try at home and let me know in the comments below how it turned out for you, and I hope it turns out really well. So remember, the recipe and everything are going to be in the description file below, so I would really like you to try it and see how it turns out for you. Well, anyway, that's all for today, and I'll see you next time, I hope, on Ruby's Classic Cooking. Bye for now.